Assalamualaikum and greetings everyone. I am Muhammad Nazrin bin Muhammad Azam, and now I will present the facts of the case involving Muhammad Sobri bin Cik Hassan and the Seberang Perai Municipal Council. To begin with, the party involved in this case are as follows. The respondent, Muhammad Sobri, is an engineer employed by the Seberang Perai Municipal Council. The appellant are the disciplinary authority of the council and the council itself. Mr. Sabri was employed under a contract of service which incorporated the Council's General Order as well as the 1995 disciplinary regulations. His tenure, however, was marked by a series of employment disputes. One of the earliest involved a transfer from the engineering department to the health service department, which he contested in the court. However, this challenge was unsuccessful. Later, he was found guilty of lateness, a charge he also attempted to overturn to judicial review, again without success. So, what happened in this case? The main incident that led to his dismissal centered on alleged of breach of regulation for subsection 2H of the 1995 disciplinary regulations. It was alleged that Muhammad Sobri had sourced outside influence, specifically by involving a state assemblyman to intervene in his internal transfer dispute. He denied the allegation, submitted a written explanation and a request for a formal disciplinary inquiry panel. However, this request was denied. Following his dismissal, Muhammad Sobri initiated a judicial review proceedings, arguing that he had been denied the right to be heard, that the disciplinary process was procedurally flawed. The High Court dismissed his application, thereby upholding the dismissal. However, on appeal, the Court of Appeal found in his favour. The court held that the dismissal had breached the Section 16, subsection 4 of the Local Government Act 1976, that there had been a procedural impropriety in disciplinary process. This case later being appealed again to the Federal Court.
Hi, I'm Nim Muhammad Faris, and now I'll be continuing the presentation on the grounds for the judicial review application. So, Muhammad Sobri filed for the judicial review to quash the dismissal decision, where his argument was that the dismissal process violated his right to be heard under Section 16, subsection 4 of the Local Government Act and breached the rules of natural justice. So, in the federal court, there were three main grounds that was applied. First was there was a procedural impropriety, where the disciplinary authority relied on a report about his past misconduct without informing him or giving him a chance to respond, which is a direct breach of natural justice. And the second one is there was a statutory breach under Section 16, subsection 4 of the Local Government Act that gives local government employees a right to have a reasonable opportunity to be heard before dismissal. And this right was, however, ignored. And lastly, the process was allegedly tainted by bias, as some decision makers may have had a conflict of interest. That's all from me.
So thank you for the previous presenter. So today I will briefly present on the remedies sought and granted in the federal court for the case of pihak berkuasa tata tertib Majlis Pembandaran Seberang Perai against Muhammad Sobri bin Cik Hassan. So in this case, it revolved around a local government employee who was dismissed from service by the disciplinary authority after being accused of misconduct. The respondent Muhammad Sobri challenged the dismissal through a judicial review application, arguing that he was not giving a fair hearing and that the disciplinary process had breached the rule of natural justice. So in his application, the respondent sought an order of certiorari to quash the dismissal decision and a declaration that the decision was invalid due to procedural improprieties. Although not directly requested, his application implied a desire for reinstatement or continuation in his employment. He contended that he had requested a formal inquiry panel to defend himself, but the request was ignored, which denied him his right to be heard. So the federal court granted the order of certiorari, effectively quashing the dismissal. It also declared that the respondent had been unlawfully dismissed due to non-compliance with the natural justice. However, the court refused to reinstate him, noting that the employment relation had broken down and the reinstatement was neither practical nor appropriate in this context. So instead, the court ordered that damage been assessed. So compared to the reinstatement, with the matter referred to the High Court for the revolution. So in conclusion, this case highlights how statutory employment is subject to public law protection, and while remedies like statutory right and declaratory relief may be granted, reinstatement is not guaranteed, and it depends on the circumstance. That's all from me. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So for my part, I would like to focusing on the legal basis for the remedies of statutory and damages, or the rationalization of this case. First, the court found that the dismissal of the respondent, an engineer who working for the local authority, to be invalid due to the procedural impropriety. Although he faced disciplinary charges, he was denied to a fundamental right to respond all the evidence considered against him. In particular, the authority relied on the past misconduct records without informing him, allowing him to contest them, which is breaching the natural justice. Second, the court held that the respondent employment was not governed not only by the contract law. His appointment was also subject to statutory protections under Section 16 Clause 4 of the Local Government Act 1976, which requires a reasonable opportunity to be heard before dismissal. This made the employment relationship one governed by public law principles rather than purely private contract law. As a result, the public law remedies were appropriate. The court issued a writ of statutory to squash the dismissal decision. This remedy does not mean reinstatement, but nullifies an unlawful administrative act, restoring the legal status before the dismissal. Finally, the court awarded the damages to compensate the respondent for the period from the unlawful dismissal to the judgment. This recognized that he had lost his job due to an unlawful act by a public authority and deserved compensation. In summary, this case confirmed that where statutory safeguards apply, breaches of natural justice in public disciplinary proceedings attract public law remedies such as statutory and damages. Thank you.
The Federal Court decision yang pihak berkuasa tata tertib Majlis Perpandaran Seberang Perai and another against Muhammad Sobri bin Encik Hassan is a landmark Malaysian administrative law. It clarifies the legal status of public sector employees and expands the scope of judicial oversight on disciplinary action by statutory authorities. The court affirmed that employment in statutory bodies such as local government under the Local Government Act 1976 is just a private contractual relationship. Instead, it carries a public law character. This means that such employment is governed by statute, not merely a contract of service. As a result, public employees have statutory procedural right, including the right to be heard before dismissal, which resembles the protection in Article 135 of the Federal Constitution. We really emphasize that when disciplinary procedures are legally regulated, strict compliance with procedural fairness is mandatory. In Muhammad Sobri case, failing to provide a fair hearing and due process rendered the dismissal invalid. This reinforces a key principle of administrative law. Any decision that impacts an individual right or livelihood must follow rules of natural justice. Section 3, Public Law Remedies. The court confirmed that the employees of statutory authorities can pursue public law remedies such as judicial review and statutory. Unlike private employment dispute, which usually end with damages, public sector employees can challenge unlawful dismissal and seek to quash tainted decision. Section 4, Clarification of Legal Misunderstanding. This decision also corrected a past misinterpretation from the Jempol case in 1997, where local authorities' employees were wrongly denied public law protection. The court clarified that statutory rights like those in Section 16 Clause 4 of the LGA are critical in distinguishing public employment from pure contractual work. In summary, this case strengthened administrative accountability, affirms procedural right for public sector workers, and enhance judicial review as a total for justice. It represents a significant step forward in aligning Malaysia's administrative law with constitutional and statutory protection for government employees.